Hi there everyone, and welcome back to another video. This is actually going to be the first video in a very probably long series because I am making my very good friend Joanna's wedding dress. This is very daunting for me if I'm being honest. I've never made anything close to this, I guess complex, and also it's a little bit overwhelming for me since this is the first project I'm doing for somebody else, and it's not just me that I have to disappoint if I mess up. But all in all, I think everything's going to turn out fine. I'm very excited for this, and in this video, I'm just going to be showing my mock-up process for the bodice of the gown and kind of how all the fittings are going to go and how everything's going to work with that. I've never designed a bodice like this one, but I'm going to try my best and hopefully everything works out well. So I just want to show this fabric that we just picked out because this is just gorgeous, and we have sparkles and pinks and gold, and we're not exactly sure how this is going to all fit together yet, but sadly it's quite a ways away that I actually get to work with this. I'm going to have to use, ugly plain muslin for a while, but anyway, just to give you an idea of the color, and the color on the camera is not even close to how beautiful it is in person, but hopefully when it's all done, it'll show better on camera. One other thing, if you want to follow me on my Instagram, Adventures with Izzy, I'll be posting updates about how everything's going with this, so you can kind of stay up to date faster than these videos will be produced. So anyway, yeah, I'm gonna get to making a mock-up because I'm super excited and I can hardly wait. Okay, so excuse the mess, but I'm done with my mock-up now, my mock-up number 1. So what I did was just cut out these 3 rectangles, 2 for the back pieces and 1 for the main front piece. And then I put darts into the main front piece to give it, that nice shape. So now I'm just awaiting, fitting to work out any kinks, but I actually think this is going to fit pretty well for a first mock-up. If you want to see a diagram, that's what I did. I had 2 of these pieces and 1 of these pieces, and I put 2 4-inch darts in the middle. So, catch up with you later. So Joanna just came over for a fitting, and what I had to do was take out 2 inches from each side seam, so add 4 inches because I forgot to leave room for it to overlap and close in the back. And then I also traced out the neckline that she wants. I'm not sure if she's okay with this pointy, so I'm going to ask her about that next time. But this is where we're at. I'm not cutting anything yet, so I think she's going to come over again tomorrow and we will go from there. So it's about a day later, and last night Joanna came for another fitting, and there's some troubles with this neckline. I realized that I cut this way too far over. It needs to be like there. This side of the, what would you call this, hump thing for the sweetheart neckline. And I also need to make the dart bigger. Let me just flip this over. I need to make the dart bigger right here and then go down again so that it takes in enough where it covers the boobs and doesn't just splay out. So anyway, we're on to mock-up 2, so that's what these are for. I then moved on to the 3rd mock-up, and this is kind of a time lapse of that process. So basically I was just adjusting the way that the darts laid and then recutting the neckline. I didn't actually make a lot of changes between this mock-up and the second one, but as you can see, there are a few changes, and that's what the finished product ended up looking like. After another fitting with Joanna, she decided that she wanted to extend the length of the bodice so it extends a few inches past the waistline. So all I did for this was extend the darts and give it the right shaping to fit her body. Listen to me. I'm filming. Don't judge me and don't laugh, okay?
I am.
Okay? So now I have the dart sewn in, and I don't know if this is the right way to do a mock-up, but this is just how I'm doing it. And I also have the neckline that I traced out with this bowl. I did this on the last ones too. And then I kind of used a ruler to make this line and extended it so that the back is a little bit shorter than the front, which is how it's supposed to be. And I'm just going to cut that down and then do the darts in the back. I'm talking to you guys in the mirror because I've realized that the microphone on my phone doesn't work when it's flipped on my face, but it works when it's flipped the other way, so I'm too lazy to go get my headphones to make the microphone work. Basically, Joanna just came over and we finished trying on the mock-up and I just made the adjustments, so it's good to go. I can start making the bodice, which I think I'm going to start working on maybe tomorrow or the next day. But what I've decided to do, since I didn't want to just kind of throw away the mock-up, I think what I'm going to do is make a Victorian corset out of the mock-up because I've always wanted to make one of those anyway, and I have it mostly done and I just need to add the boning channels and the casing around the edges. So I'm just going to film really quickly in this video how I'm going to attempt to do that, and we'll see how it turns out because it's a really last minute decision, but I hope she likes it. And it's just going to be like I mean, we're different sizes, so I can't keep it for myself. I wish I could. But I'm just going to give it to her and be like, this is a Victorian corset for you. I'm going to try to make it pretty, so anyway, we're going to go do that. So this is the completely finished mock-up. I just made all the adjustments, and what I did, instead of making a full-on pattern, I just am going to use squares, and then I have a darting pattern here for the front of it and the back panel, and I just need to be... You're interrupting my filming.
I think I'm being followed.
By who? By what's his face, Jeffrey Dahmer?
No, okay,
So my plan to add the boning is I'm going to do the boning channels on the outside. So I'm gonna add the boning this way. I'm just gonna cut down the seam allowance and then press them open and then add the boning channels on top. And then Joanna really likes sparkles, so I'm going to case it in this sparkly ribbon that I have left over from another project. So I decided to tear all the boning channels instead of cut them. This way I know that they're exactly straight on the grain line, and this is actually very convenient. It was very easy to iron these into place knowing that they were going to be the same width. Next, what I did is cut down the seam allowances on the darts with pinking shears, and then I pressed them flat and I laid the boning channel on top of the seam and pinned it into place. With pinning and sewing these boning channels, I actually found that it was really helpful to sort of overpin the boning channels. Usually I like to pin as little as possible. I find it a lot easier to just hold the fabric or line it up with my hands before it goes into the sewing machine. But with something like boning channels where you're working with a garment that's supposed to be three-dimensional, it really helps to make sure that the pins are holding it so that there's no warping of the fabric or wrinkling at the end. Okay, so after I was done with the back boning channels, I did the front boning channels, and these were even trickier because the darts in the front obviously have a lot of shaping for the bust. So I made sure to iron these as flat as I could possibly get them before I cut them down. And after I cut them down as small as I could, I ironed the seams flat, open and flat again. And I felt like the more I ironed, the easier it became to lay the boning channels on top of it because the actual seam wasn't adding as much bulk. To ensure that I had enough length in the boning channel to line up with the dart in the bust or seam in the bust, I laid my fabric over sort of an old bra and then I pinned everything into place. When I was sewing these front boning channels, I made sure to hold the fabric tenser than the boning channel to make sure that there was enough length in the boning channel to go across the whole front of the corset and not to pull the fabric and wrinkle it up, sort of gathering it in a way and making the front shorter. I don't know if that made any sense, but hopefully you understood. To do the side boning channels, I actually had enough left over from the seam line, so I just folded, or the seam allowance, excuse me, so I just folded the seam allowance over and then pinned it into place and sewed it. I actually found this to be quite a convenient and quick method without needing much pinning or maneuvering in the sewing machine since it was just a straight seam. After kind of holding it up to myself, I decided that it would probably be best if I added a few more boning channels to the front. So I added one on each side, like sort of mid-side between the side seam and the front bust seam. To do this, I just made one line and lined up one side of the boning channel with it. So I'm pretty happy because this was my first time doing boning channels like this. I've only ever done cording channels and it was with 2 layers. So anyway, this is my first time doing this type of thing. And I think it actually turned out pretty well. Of course, there's a few flaws here and there, but pretty unnoticeable. So for my boning pattern, I basically used the excess from the side seams to make 2 on the side, and then I added 1 over the middle back seam and 1 over the front seams. And then I also added this extra one on kind of the side front just for extra support. And later on I might add 2 in the middle depending on what I do for closures, if I just have a back closure or if I decide to add a bust closure in the middle. Right now what I'm going to focus on next, because my zip ties that I'm going to use for the boning got delayed, so it's not coming until a few days. So I'm going to work on getting my boning channels in the back set and then adding the grommets in the middle of 2 different boning channels. So I'm going to get to that next. I have the boning channels done for half of it. I only have the back of this side to do. So I wanted to test this out first before I filmed it. What I did was I just folded this over by 1.5 inches, and then I sewed the 2 boning channels on either side, and then the grommets are going to go in the middle here. I just tested out putting in grommets. I've never done this before, so this is my first time, and I kind of figured out, I was given this little tool by a friend to put in grommets, and I figured out how, like, the best, oh my gosh, struggling with words, the best method to do it. So I didn't want to just make holes and try to do this for the first time on the actual thing. So I'm going to film doing the other side like this so you can see what I did, and then get to setting all these in. It's a little bit scary to make holes, but whatever. Like I mentioned before, to do the back boning channels and to make the space for the grommets between, all I did was measure 3 inches away from the very back and fold the fabric to meet that line. Then I pinned everything into place and I sewed the proper seam lines so that I could fit 2 boning channels and a row of grommets down the back. After finishing with the back seams, I decided that I needed to add some waist tape because this is a 1-layer corset and the fabric isn't very thick. I knew that I would need to take some tension off of the vertical seams running up and down. So I just sewed the waist tape into place in multiple areas right along the boning channels, and I think it held up pretty well. Next, I marked the spaces for the grommets, and although it was my first time doing grommets, I think that I did an okay job at it. It obviously is sort of a trial and error thing, so there are a few grommets that are messed up and don't look the best, but this is how I did it. So I poked a hole in the fabric and I broke just a few threads and widened the hole with a pencil. Then I stuck the grommet through, pulled all of the threads out of the way, and hammered it into place. This is what it looked like when I was done without any boning channels. I used my mom as a model because she has a much more similar body to Joanna than I do. So at this point, the corset was pretty much done construction-wise. The last thing to do was to add the casing and the boning channels. So I added the bottom casing first, and after I was done with sewing that on, it was time to insert the zip ties into the boning channels. So I just cut the little, I guess, head off the zip tie and rounded the corners so they wouldn't poke through the fabric with scissors. I didn't take the time to file them down just because I'm lazy. Now, I know there's about 1,000 videos out there with myth busting that corsets are these torture devices they're often made out to be, but I can't tell you how true I found this when I was handling a garment like this myself. When I was putting this on my mom, and Joanna's since worn it, they both said it wasn't uncomfortable and it was very supportive. Alright, hi everyone. So I don't think I've talked to the camera about this project in a while. So I have basically been working pretty hard on turning the last mock-up of Joanna's dress bodice into a corset for her to wear under if she wants. This is a surprise for her, so she doesn't know anything about this yet. But right now this is the first corset I've ever made, so I'm playing around with things and trying to be careful not to make any major cuts without thinking things through. So right now I basically have pretty much everything done except the top binding, because I still need to cut down the neckline a little bit, and then I need to cut down the boning channels to fit properly. But I'm very excited about this project and I think it's going to look really pretty. So I just kind of wanted to give a quick update about what I've been doing with that, and I hope you enjoy watching the rest of this because this is a total experiment for me. But yeah, anyway, let's get to it. So now I tried this on my mom because she fits this a lot better than I do. So after trying it on her, I realized I needed to cut some down on the sides for your arms, or for the arms. And then, so I just kind of made this little line right here. After I cut that down, I took out these boning channels. I'm going to cut these down to fit properly, and then I'm also going to cut down this extra seam allowance on the neckline right before I sew it, just because I didn't want it to fray too much while I was still handling it. But anyway, I'm pretty much done. The top of the binding is going to be this gold ribbon that I put on here, along with this beautiful lace I got at Joann's, with this pink ribbon laced through that. So yeah, I'm also going to show how I made this binding. So this actually is just a 1/2 inch ribbon. This actually is a 1/2 inch ribbon, and I attached it to a piece of cloth so it could go around. So I'm going to show all of that. I found that this was actually a pretty cool little hack. So anyway, I guess we're back to time lapses. And really quickly before I continue, you might see this weird little contraption I've made. This is an old bra that I was gonna give away that's kind of ugly. And then these are pads that I've taken out of like the removable pad places from, I always take them out, so I have like a billion of them. And now that I'm sewing, they actually work out really nicely. So I'm going to attempt to put the pads into the corset after I'm done with everything. So that's what this little contraption is. It also really helps when I'm measuring things out to kind of set this on here so that I can see sort of what the shape's gonna be like. So I don't know. It's kind of weird to just have like a bra sitting there, so I wanted to explain what that was. So like I mentioned before, I decided to cut down the neckline a little bit, both so that it wouldn't show out from under the dress, and also to give a little bit more room for arms and movement. So anyway, I just cut that down with pinking shears because I didn't want it to fray. This fabric, it's cotton, but it is a very light cotton, so it is prone to fraying. After I cut down the neckline, I had to cut down the corresponding boning channels a little bit. So after measuring and doing all that and putting those back in, it was time to make the casing for the top of the corset to conceal all the raw seams and keep the boning semi in place, at least within the corset, but the flossing does that later. Alrighty, this is how I'm making my lining. So I've got this long strip of just the same fabric as my corset, and excuse the random, oh my gosh, okay. Anyway, then I am sewing this right sides together to the ribbon. Excuse my sister.
Izzy.
1 minute, let me finish explaining.
What are you doing?
Then you sew it right sides together and then flip it inside out so it has this lovely edge like this. And it's longer on this side so you don't end up running the thread off the binding, which I do a lot. So all I did for the casing was sew the ribbon onto a strip of fabric because I wanted the full 1/2 inch showing on the front of this sparkly gold ribbon instead of just a 1/4 inch.
No, not Ed Sheeran.
Before I sewed it on, I definitely did a lot of ironing so that it would sit nicely, and then I pinned it into place. Again, I found that overpinning did wonders, and I think it turned out really beautifully. Next, I pinned this beautiful wedding lace that I got just at Joann's, but I thought it was really pretty, onto the front. And then, when I was done sewing that on, it was time to lace this really pretty light pink ribbon through. And this goes with the color scheme of the dress, which just makes my absolute day. When I put the ribbon in, I made sure that it wasn't twisting around at all, and I also tried to sort of flare the ribbon out nicely so that it would have a really nice decorative effect, which I think it did. After that was done, I was pretty much completely done. The only last minute thing I decided to do was floss the boning channels to keep the boning in place. I decided to do a simple V pattern because this is my first time ever flossing a corset. Alrighty, so she is completely done. I just finished doing all the flossing and I did a really simple pattern just because it was my first time, and also I was ready to be done with this even though I enjoyed it. I get antsy at the end. So I also added in some little I guess, boob cups. And these are just pads taken from a sports bra that I have that I never use the pads in. Like I said before, I have like about 1 billion of these sets of removable pads, so comes in handy, I guess, now. But I just, when I did the flossing on these, the boning channels over the boobies, I just flossed them through the cups, so they're just held in really loosely. These are not, the boning pieces are not fully as high as, they don't go all the way to the top. I would like to say that was on purpose. It wasn't. I just ordered too short of boning of zip ties, I guess. But I actually think it works out well because it'll be softer up here, and so I just kind of use the cup to fill out that little extra bit right there. But everything else fit pretty well. It looks fine. For the actual bodice, I'm going to order some of the longer zip ties. I think I'm going to go 20 inches. These are only 12 inches, but overall, I'm super happy with how this turned out, and I am so excited to give it to Joanna. I think she's going to absolutely love it. So, yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. Thanks, everyone, for watching, and I will see you next time.